All right, friends, welcome back. I am, of course, Tony Toon. I am the great, glorious, and altogether beautiful Walrus.
And welcome back this afternoon. I am Leanne Palmer, your sparkly and glittery fairy. And yeah, we'll just leave it there for now. Today we're going to be discussing climate change.
Ooh, boy.
Formerly known as global warming.
Formerly known as global cooling.
Which is why I like the term climate change better.
It is climate change.
Because that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. And it was a PR move on their part, too. Probably a good one.
But whether you believe in global warming or global cooling or whatever it is, our climate is changing. Constantly changing. And it goes through smaller, shorter cycles, which we see on a yearly basis, which is technically the changing of the seasons is a change of climate.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on larger cycles. And we're hitting a period of one of those larger cycles.
Yes.
Where the magnetic pole is drifting.
Yes.
And they have proven that it is drifting, and you can see the magnetics of where it's drifting. And that's causing some instability of the polar
caps.
Polar caps, the magnetic rings that hold in that cold air, the polar vortexes, which is what happened this past winter when they came further down south than would normally happen. All of this goes into climate change. And if you look down on the southern hemisphere, the South Pole is shifting, and they're having some of the same issues as we are here in the northern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by not acknowledging the fact that, yes, the climate is changing, and it is a natural process, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Yes. I mean, as far as climate change itself goes, I mean, yes, it is companies, militaries, all of them, they're opening up shipping lanes where there weren't shipping lanes before in the north, in the Arctic Sea. So, yes, something is changing up there. Now that said, man-made climate change. You sold on it or not? Because this is where people are going to get pissed, I think. Yes
and no.
I unfortunately agree with that too. So we're both wafflers.
Well, it's not that I waffle.
Yes.
It's are we 100% to cause for climate change? No. Because as I said, the planet goes through these long-term cycles, and we're hitting one of these long-term cycles. However, a lot of the abuse to the environment and unsustainability that we have created in the environment, I think, is exacerbating the situation. So, yeah, kind of man-made, but not completely. I think had we not done a lot of the things we did with the Industrial Revolution and the switch to plastics and this, as we were talking about in the other video, the big floating island of garbage in the Pacific, what we'd be feeling wouldn't be as drastic, and would feel a little more natural. They talk about there is a recorded year in the 1800s that is known as the year without a summer.
Yeah.
Because of these larger cycles that the planet goes through.
Yes, and that was a year there was a volcanic eruption in the Philippines.
Krakatoa, I think it was, that went off.
Yes, and we'll get into a little bit because I know that's kind of a lot of people who push this man-made climate change kind of laugh when people who are a little bit skeptical talk about volcanoes and what they do. If you're laughing at that, you're stupid. Well, not necessarily stupid. Maybe that's a little bit rough way to put it, but come on, dude. You got to think things through a little bit better.
You're not looking at it from a completely logical perspective.
Yes. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually going to give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez some credit here.
Okay. I'm impressed. And shocked.
Yes.
Who are you, and what have you done with my actual walrus?
One of the biggest reasons why I was skeptical about climate change, and still not completely sold on man-made climate change, was the push that carbon monoxide was the main contributor.
Okay.
Now, that never made sense to me, because carbon monoxide is plant food, basically. And every time I looked at a volcanic eruption and its numbers of pollutants put in the air, the amount of CO2 levels that it would put out would equal or surpass even the worst projections that we have ever put out with all of the Industrial Revolution and everything. Now, that said, methane makes sense to me causing climate change. Now, and this has actually made sense to me for a long time, the amount of methane put into the air through dairy farms and through farming in general is massive.
Are you talking about methane produced by cow farts?
Yes. It's laughable, but it is true. Our dairy farms produce a lot of methane. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but produce far more than that is put out by volcanic eruptions or that is released naturally. Now, that said, I don't think the solution to the problem is to get rid of our dairy farms. But it also tells me that it is funny, it is hilarious that the cow is going to destroy the planet.
I don't think the cow is going to destroy the planet.
I don't either.
I think it has to do with the way dairy farms
are run
and feed the cows that then produces more methane.
Yes.
Because one of the things I found out shortly before moving here is that dairy farmers feed cows candy.
Yes.
And I found this out because a truck crashed on a country road in Nebraska, spilling red Skittles all over the ground. Well, it turns out that he was loaded with the imperfect candies from the Skittle factory and was taking them to the dairy farms to then be given to the cows.
Yeah.
Because it produces more fat, and more fat produces more milk.
Yep.
And I think coming at it from that point, it almost makes logical sense that if you're feeding a cow something it's not designed to eat, it's gonna produce more gas. It's the same thing as like you or I eating something that we're not really supposed to eat, and we get gassy. So, no, dairy farming is not going to kill the planet, but I do think that we need to find a healthier way for dairy farmers to run for the cows.
Yes. And that's the extent of credit I give AOC, because that was something I've always thought about. It's like, I never took it very seriously because I knew I always looked this stuff up on my own. And I was like, these guys aren't even talking about the methane release or, the effect agriculture has on greenhouse gases. So it's always industry is evil. It's like, well, that's not the main cause. It kind of sounds to me like you want to put people out of work. Noggins a jogging. Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories.
That I'm not entirely sure if is a conspiracy theory.
We should do a video on conspiracy theories sometime.
A lot of different conspiracy theories.
The aliens did it.
The aliens always did it. But anyway, and then talking about climate change, this area around here used to be an ocean. Then it was a desert. Then I think it was an ocean again. Then it was marshland. Then I think it was a desert again. Then it was prairie. Then the settlers moved in, and now it's classified as forest land. Indiana is classified as forest land. And naturally, Indiana is not a forest. It's a prairie.
Well, I think it was more marshland when the settlers moved in, because the prairies are further west.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe more marshland, but not
because we're
not
closer
like
to
Everglade marshes.
Not like the Everglades, but more marshland because we are closer to the Great Lakes where we are, and I think we have a higher water table.
Yeah.
So not Great Lakes marshland, but higher water table marshland.
Yes. That's why a lot of people, if you're in the Great Lakes area and you're looking around, especially in the southern Great Lakes region, and you see these forests and you say, oh, look how beautiful. Those forests aren't natural. Those forests were put there by us. But
to try and deal with the marshland so that we could actually build our houses.
Yes. So yes, obviously humans that can have a huge effect on the environment. Just look at that story, or look at the I can't think of the name, but it was in New York how they the reason why New York the city exists is because they diverted the river.
Right. Well, there's an entire section of San Francisco that was built, like the land itself, part of the peninsula did not exist.
Oh, it's like a dike.
No, it's like they pushed and filled it in with dirt.
Okay, yeah.
And built it up, and they filled it in with trash and landfill, and
like the Dutch do.
Right.
I forget the exact words they use.
But there's an entire section of San Francisco that is
artificial.
Mm-hmm. So yes, man can affect climate change.
Yeah.
Do I think that man-made environmental things have contributed to climate change? Yes, but maybe not to the extent that they're claiming.
Yes. And just kind of going into those volcano things like we were talking earlier. Remember in the early 90s or late 80s when Mount St. Helens erupted?
It was 1980.
1980 when Mount St. Helens erupted. The sunsets, if you were alive during that time, look a lot different than they do now.
Well, even today, the sunsets up in the Pacific Northwest are still beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely gorgeous. But what happened is that St. Helens erupted.
Mm-hmm.
It spewed tons and tons of ash.
Dust, carbon monoxide, everything.
Right. Into the air. And as the sun would set, it started reflecting off the dust particles and the ash particles that were still in the air. You might not be able to see them, but they're still suspended there.
Mm-hmm.
And this phenomenon happened worldwide.
Yeah.
And we saw this again a couple years ago when the volcano went off in Iceland.
I'm not gonna near Reykjavik. I know how to pronounce Reykjavik. I don't know how to pronounce. Yeah, Reykjavik.
Reykjavik is actually not Iceland.
You sure? I thought that was the capital. I know it was near that there. Regardless, the one in Iceland went off, and it shut Europe down for 2 weeks.
Well, it shut most plane travel down for a very long time. And people got trapped in London, and people got trapped in Ireland, and Dublin, and New York, and Boston.
Yeah.
Boston, a lot of the flights couldn't do it.
A lot of northern cities.
Right. But it affected the sunsets around the world for a few days there too. For the same reason, it was the ash and the dust and the gases that were released that then the sunlight reflected as it hit the horizon for us. And that can cause global cooling, which is what we were talking about earlier in the Year Without a Summer. It was a volcano that went off and spewed enough ash into the air that the sunlight couldn't get through.
Yeah, and there was snow in July in Europe.
Right.
In Berlin.
And here in the U.S., they talk about it. It's not as well known because we were still...
It didn't knock out all summer around the world. You went further down south, a lot of places still had a summer.
Right.
But up north,
right,
there was no growing season.
Right, and I'm talking about like what we now refer to as our breadbasket.
Yeah.
And Colorado and Idaho and Nebraska and Iowa, all of those states were all affected as well.
Yeah.
And globally, the temperature dropped by several degrees.
Yes. A lot of people thought the world was ending, understandably.
Right. But I think people, when talking about climate change, people need to remember that the planet itself goes through cycles, short cycles, yearly cycles, decade cycles, the El Nino La Nina cycles. You have the larger cycles that happen every 5,000 or 6,000 years with the poles and the magnetics and that sort of thing, the magnetic poles shifting. And I think that's where we're at now. And people need to take that into consideration. But as I said earlier in the video, I don't think that that's completely everything that's going on. That some of what we have done through the Industrial Revolution has added to that through the release of carbon monoxides, through the release of methanes, through the release of CFCs and plastics in the ocean, and all of that is contributing and making what would normally be a regular cycle for the planet worse.
Yeah. To put it this way, I'm much more worried about toxifying an environment than I am global climate change.
And toxification of the environment is absolutely a human thing.
Yes. Even though that goes more into... Maybe we should have brought that up in the environmental video. But regardless, people know what we're talking about. And I hate to say this, but I kind of view climate change, global warming, global cooling, as kind of the doomsday of this new secular religion that we've seen grow.
Yeah.
I that's the way I view it. As it's their doomsday.
Well, even with some non-secular religions, they point to things going on as being predicted by the Book of Revelations and the Book of Daniel and some of that. And I think it really is something for any person who wants to latch onto that sort of energy to cling on to and say, hey, look, this is going on. We're all going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that. And
because conspiracy theories.
Yeah. And speaking of that, volcanoes, that's the personal theory I prescribe to with how the dinosaurs went extinct. With when the meteorite hit the Yucatan Peninsula, it hit with such force that all the volcanoes erupted. So not only did you get hit by a gigantic meteorite, all the volcanoes erupted at the same time.
From the sheer force.
Yeah, because it was such an earth-shattering event. Which is one of the scenarios that I fear the most when I think about space and all that stuff. If we're hit by a meteorite and it's big enough to just kill everything, then it's going to be really quick. But if it's like the size that hit the Yucatan Peninsula, where it hits and then sets off a bunch of volcanoes, there'll still be humans around because humans are at the top of the food train, and as long as the planet's capable of sustaining life, humans are going to be around. But
it's going to be really rough for a while.
A lot of people are going to die. Billions. Probably 99% of the population would die. Be crazy. That's one of the scenarios I've thought about. Because that would obviously be an extinction level event.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my personal theory of how the dinosaurs died. And I think that's backed up with science. But anyway, that's off topic.
Totally off topic. And I think I've covered everything that I wanted to with global climate change.
Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say as well.
Tony.
What?
You cannot breathe, drink, and talk at the same time.
I do what I want when I want. I'm one half of this show, and I demand my respect.
I'm just reminding you that some of us are just not that talented.
I'll find a way. I will find a way.
And on that note, if you have comments, if you have questions, if you have criticisms, please feel free to leave those in the comment section. Thumbs up, thumbs down the video, whichever way.
Yeah, YouTube doesn't care. It's interaction. So
interact. If you don't like the video, put the thumbs down and then tell us why in the comment section.
Yeah.
Subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification button so that you know when our videos go up every day.
Mm-hmm.
And have a nice afternoon.
Yes. Run, be free, and don't be afraid of the dinosaur asteroids.